The Great Hall of the Galaxy Council stretched across 3 miles of polished crystal floor. Representatives from 47 different species sat in their assigned sections, each group more strange than the last. Some floated in liquid-filled chambers, while others perched on heated rocks that glowed red in the dim light. The air recyclers worked overtime to keep the atmosphere breathable for everyone, creating a constant low hum that filled the enormous space. High Counselor Vexthara of the Ancient Mothers called the session to order with a gesture of her 6 tentacles. Her species had been around for 12 million years, longer than any other in the known galaxy. When she spoke, even the most arrogant races listened. Her voice carried through the translation devices that every being wore, coming out as a whisper that somehow reached every corner of the hall. Today we discuss the matter brought forward by the Zephyrian Empire, she announced. Admiral Koroth has requested permission to address the Council regarding their expansion plans. A murmur ran through the assembled beings. The Zephyrians were known for their military strength and their short temper. They controlled 3 star systems and had been looking to expand for decades. Most council members assumed they wanted to claim some empty worlds or negotiate mining rights in disputed space. Admiral Koroth rose from his section, his blue-scaled form towering 8 feet tall. His species looked somewhat like humans if humans had been crossed with lizards and given an extra set of arms. Battle scars covered his visible skin, and his yellow eyes swept across the council chamber with obvious disdain. He had fought in 17 different wars and won them all. To him, this council was just a formality before he took what he wanted anyway. "Honored representatives," he began, his voice carrying the rough edge of someone used to shouting orders over battlefield noise. "The Zephyrian Empire comes before you today to announce our intention to claim the world designated as Sol 3 by your charts. The inhabitants call it Earth." The reaction was immediate. Several species began clicking or chittering in their native languages. The crystal beings chimed like broken bells. Even the usually silent gas dwellers released puffs of colored vapor that their translators couldn't interpret, but everyone understood meant surprise. Counselor Genter of the Peaceful Collective raised one of her 4 hands. Her species had never fought a war in their 3-million-year history. They solved all disputes through meditation and shared consciousness experiences. "Admiral Koroth, surely you mean to establish trade relations with the humans. They seem to be a developing species with much potential." Koroth's laugh sounded like metal scraping against stone. "Trade? With primitives who have barely left their own world? No, Counselor, we mean to conquer them completely. Their world has resources we need, and their resistance will provide excellent training for our young warriors." The hall fell silent except for the air recyclers. Even those seemed to pause for a moment. Then the whispers started, growing louder until they filled the space with a sound like wind through dead leaves. High Counselor Vexthara's tentacles began to tremble. She had seen the ancient records, the warnings passed down from species that no longer existed. Her voice shook as she spoke. "Admiral, you cannot possibly understand what you are suggesting. Earth is marked in our oldest databases. It carries a classification that should terrify any intelligent being." "And what classification is that?" Koroth asked, crossing all 4 of his arms. "Primitive, backwards, defenseless." "Death World," Vexthara whispered, and the hall went completely silent. The term meant something specific in galactic terminology. Most species evolved on worlds where survival was relatively easy. Plenty of food, mild weather, few natural disasters. They developed intelligence and technology slowly, peacefully. But death worlds were different. Everything on a death world tried to kill everything else. The weather was violent. The animals were predators. Even the plants were dangerous. Species that survived on death worlds developed different traits than everyone else. Representative Quindle of the Harmonious Republic spoke up, his crystalline voice tinkling like broken glass. "Surely the classification is incorrect. We have observed the humans for 6 months since first contact. They seem pleasant enough. Their diplomat John Mitchell has been nothing but courteous during our preliminary meetings." "Pleasant," agreed Koroth with another harsh laugh. Which is why they will be easy to conquer. We have studied their military capabilities. Their weapons are primitive chemical rockets and metal projectiles. Their largest ships cannot even leave their own star system. We will be done with this conquest in a matter of weeks. But the elder species were not laughing. The ancient mothers had been around long enough to remember stories of the last Deathworld species the galaxy had encountered. That had been 8 million years ago, and those beings had been peaceful traders who just wanted to explore the stars. Yet when pirates attacked one of their colonies, the response had been so swift and brutal that 3 entire pirate fleets had been wiped out in a single day. The survivors spoke of creatures that fought with a fury that defied all logic, beings who would rather die than let harm come to their families. Admiral, Vextara tried again, her ancient voice carrying the weight of eons. You must reconsider. The humans may seem primitive, but they come from a world where survival required constant vigilance. They have evolved traits that civilized species lack. They are pack hunters, territorial defenders, and their capacity for violence when threatened is beyond our ability to measure, Koroth waved dismissively. Old fears and older superstitions. The humans have shown no aggression toward anyone. They answered our communication attempts with curiosity and friendship. They sent 1 diplomat to meet with us, not a fleet of warships. They are clearly a peaceful species that will surrender once they realize they cannot win. That diplomat, interrupted Counselor Melrin of the scholarly caste. Did you notice anything unusual about him during your meetings? Nothing worth mentioning, Koroth replied. He was polite, asked many questions about our culture and technology, and seemed genuinely interested in peaceful relations. A typical representative of a weak species hoping to avoid conflict through diplomacy. What Koroth had not mentioned, because he had not understood its significance, was how John Mitchell's eyes had tracked every weapon in the room during their meetings. How the human had memorized the layout of their ship in a single walk through the corridors. How he had asked seemingly innocent questions about Zephyrian military doctrine and fleet compositions. The Admiral had interpreted all of this as the curiosity of a primitive mind exposed to advanced technology for the first time. The elder species recognized it for what it truly was, reconnaissance. The matter is decided, Koroth declared. Our fleet of 200 ships departs for Earth in 7 standard days. We will establish orbital control, destroy their primitive military forces, and begin occupation of their major population centers. The operation should be complete within 1 standard month. High Counselor Vextara made one final attempt. Admiral Koroth, I beg you to reconsider. Send a larger diplomatic mission instead. Learn more about these humans before you act. The galaxy has been at peace for 3,000 years, precisely because we have learned to resolve conflicts without violence. Peace is weakness, Koroth snarled. The Zephyrian Empire was built on strength, and we will continue to expand through strength. This council can either support our rightful conquest or stay out of our way. With that, he turned and strode from the hall, his officers following behind him. The massive doors sealed shut behind them with a sound like thunder. The remaining representatives sat in stunned silence for several minutes. Finally, Counselor Genter spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. Should we warn the humans? It would violate the non-interference protocols, replied Quindle, though his crystalline form had lost much of its usual glow. We cannot intervene in conflicts between member species and non-members. Then we can only watch, Vextara said. Sadly, and hope that the Zephyrians learn the truth about Deathworlders before it is too late for all of us. She did not specify whether she feared it would be too late for the Zephyrians or for the galaxy itself. In her ancient wisdom, she suspected both might be true. The Zephyrian fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of Earth's solar system exactly 7 days later. 200 warships arranged themselves in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming silver against the black of space. Admiral Koroth stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the primitive blue-green world grow larger on the main screen. In a few hours, this backward planet would belong to the Zephyrian Empire. "Sir, we are receiving transmission attempts from the humans," reported his communications officer. "Multiple sources, all broadcasting on primitive radio frequencies." "Ignore them," Koroth ordered. "We have nothing to discuss with primitives who are about to become our slaves." But the communications officer looked puzzled as he monitored the signals. "Admiral, the transmissions are not what we expected. They are not begging for mercy or trying to surrender. They are asking why we have come and whether we need assistance." Koroth laughed, the sound echoing through the bridge. "They think we are here for help. How perfectly primitive. Begin the attack on their orbital installations. We will show them the true purpose of our visit." The first wave of Zephyrian fighters screamed toward Earth's moon, where human mining operations and research stations dotted the gray surface. The pilots expected to find frightened civilians running for shelter. Instead, they found something that made no sense according to their intelligence reports. The humans were fighting back. Captain Lisa Martinez had been running a routine cargo haul between Earth and the lunar mining station when the alien ships appeared. Her freighter was designed to carry supplies, not fight wars, but when she saw the fighters heading toward the defenseless mining colony, something inside her snapped. She turned her ship directly toward the attacking formation and opened her cargo. Bay doors, what came out was not weapons or ammunition. It was mining charges, industrial cutting tools, and construction equipment that had never been designed for combat. But humans had always been good at making tools work for purposes their makers never intended. The mining charges detonated among the Zephyrian fighters like tiny stars, their shockwaves sending several ships spinning out of control. "This is Captain Martinez to all human vessels," she broadcast on all frequencies. "They came to our home without permission and they opened fire first." "I don't know about you, but where I come from, that means we fight back." The response surprised even her. Every human ship in the system, from massive cargo haulers to tiny personal craft, turned toward the invading fleet. They had no weapons beyond mining tools and industrial equipment, but they moved with a purpose that sent chills through Zephyrian Command. Commander Jake Sullivan was in charge of Orbital Station Gamma 7 when the attack began. The station was a research facility studying cosmic radiation, staffed by scientists and engineers who had never seen combat. When Zephyrian Marines began boarding his station, Sullivan grabbed a welding torch and met them at the airlock. The first Zephyrian through the door expected to face cowering researchers. Instead, he found a middle-aged man in a lab coat who moved like he had been born fighting. Sullivan used the welding torch like a sword, its superheated flame cutting through alien armor as if it were paper. Behind him, physicist Dr. Nancy Brooks threw experimental chemicals that ate through Zephyrian equipment, while biologist Dr. Carl Adams used a sample collection robot to pin enemy soldiers against the walls. "You picked the wrong species to mess with," Sullivan growled as he disabled the third Marine through the door. "We didn't claw our way to the top of our planet's food chain by running away from bullies." On Earth's surface, the reaction was even more dramatic. The moment news of the attack reached the planet, every human conflict stopped instantly. Wars that had been going on for decades ended in minutes as both sides turned their attention to the real threat. Corporate executives donated their entire military budgets to planetary defense. Street gangs started hunting for ways to reach orbit so they could join the fight. In New York, construction foreman Danny Rodriguez watched Zephyrian dropships landing. In Central Park, he looked at his crew of 20 men, all holding tools designed for building rather than destroying, and made a decision that would become legendary. "Boys, looks like we got some uninvited guests who need to learn some manners. Let's show them how we handle trespass in this neighborhood." The Zephyrian Marines who emerged from the dropships expected to face military resistance. Instead, they found themselves fighting construction workers who used bulldozers as weapons and turned jackhammers into instruments of war. Rodriguez himself drove his excavator straight through an enemy transport, its bucket crushing alien soldiers while he screamed something about property values. Nurse Amanda Foster was working the night shift at Brooklyn General Hospital when the aliens landed. She had spent 15 years caring for people, healing wounds and saving lives. But when Zephyrian troops tried to take over her hospital, something primal awakened in her. She grabbed a hunting rifle from the security office, a weapon she had never fired before, and took position in the stairwell. What happened next defied everything the Zephyrians thought they knew about peaceful species. Foster moved through the hospital like a ghost, appearing behind enemy soldiers and disappearing before they could react. She used her knowledge of anatomy to place every shot with surgical precision, dropping aliens with single rounds while never endangering any patients or staff. "This is my hospital," she told a wounded Zephyrian officer as she bandaged his wounds after disarming his entire squad. "I took an oath to do no harm, but that oath has limits. You threaten my patients. You deal with me." In suburban Chicago, 16-year-old Kevin Blake was playing video games when the invasion began. Within an hour, he had hacked into the Zephyrian communication network using nothing but his home computer and raw determination. He started feeding false coordinates to their ships, sending reinforcements to empty fields while human defenders prepared ambush at the real target sites. "Mom always said I spent too much time on the computer," he muttered as he sent an entire Zephyrian battalion to the wrong city. Guess she was wrong about that. But the moment that truly broke Zephyrian morale came at Roosevelt Elementary School. Teacher Mary Johnson was reading to her third-grade class when alien soldiers kicked down the classroom door. 28. Children cowered behind tiny desks while creatures with 4 arms and yellow eyes pointed weapons at them. Johnson stood up slowly, putting herself between the aliens and her students. She was 42 years old, weighed barely 100 pounds, and had never hurt anyone in her life. The only weapon she could find was a fire extinguisher from the hallway. "You have 5 seconds to leave my classroom," she said quietly. The Zephyrian squad leader laughed and raised his weapon. He had killed hundreds of beings across a dozen worlds. One small human female would be nothing. He was wrong. When the smoke cleared, 12 elite Zephyrian commandos lay dead on the classroom floor. Mary Johnson stood among them, covered in alien blood, still holding the empty fire extinguisher. She turned to her students with the same gentle smile she always wore. "Is everyone okay?" "Good. Now, where were we in our story?" The Galaxy Council. Observers watching through hidden sensors struggled to process what they were seeing. This was not how civilized species behaved when attacked. Civilized beings either surrendered or fought according to established military doctrine. They did not turn gardening tools into weapons. They did not sacrifice their lives for strangers. They certainly did not smile while covered in enemy blood, but humans were not civilized in the way. The galaxy understood the term. They were something far more dangerous. They were survivors from a world that had tried to kill them every day for millions of years. And now, for the first time in their history, they faced a threat that came from outside their world. The Zephyrians had made the galaxy's greatest mistake. They had given humanity a common enemy. News of the invasion spread across Earth faster than the Zephyrians had thought possible. Within minutes of the first attack, every human on the planet knew that aliens had come to their world with hostile intentions. What happened next was something the galaxy had never witnessed before. An entire species united by a single purpose. President Rebecca Stone stood in the Emergency Command Center beneath the White House, surrounded by military advisors and world leaders connected through secure video links. Her voice was calm when she addressed the planet, but there was something underneath that calmness that sent chills through anyone who heard it. "My fellow humans," she began, "today we learned that we are not alone in the universe. We also learned that some of our neighbors believe they can take our home from us by force. They have made a mistake that will echo through history. This is our world, these are our children, and we will show them what happens when you threaten a human family." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Corporate executive Peter Davis, who controlled the largest weapons manufacturing company in North America, called the president directly. "Madam President, every factory I own is now working for the war effort. We'll have ammunition and equipment ready for shipment within hours." Send me coordinates and consider it done. In Moscow, President Volkov made a similar call. Two nations that had been enemies for decades suddenly found themselves planning joint military operations. Russian nuclear submarines surfaced alongside American destroyers. Chinese manufacturing plants began producing American-designed weapons, while Japanese engineers shared their most advanced robotics technology. General Carl Thompson had spent 30 years preparing for wars between human nations. Now he found himself coordinating a defense against aliens, and the speed at which his species adapted amazed even him. All units, this is General Thompson. New rules as of right now: there are no more national armies. There is only the human army. Anyone who can fight, fights. Anyone who can build, builds. Anyone who can think, thinks. We are one species now. The transformation was visible everywhere. In the streets of Chicago, rival gangs met at neutral territory for the first time in years. The North Side Serpents and the Iron Wolves had been killing each other for decades. But when Zephyrian dropships began landing in their neighborhoods, they found themselves fighting side by side. You see that building over there? Gang leader Marcus Washington asked his former enemy Rico Martinez, pointing at a Zephyrian command post. That used to be Mrs. Henderson's grocery store. She gave me free candy when I was 7 years old. Now some lizard freaks think they can set up shop there and take over our neighborhood. Rico nodded grimly. My grandmother lives 2 blocks from here. These aliens want to mess with human families? Let's show them what human families do to protect each other. Together, they led a combined force of street fighters and ex-convicts, in an assault that military historians would later study for its brutal effectiveness. They used knowledge of urban warfare gained from years of territorial disputes, combined with an intimate understanding of every alley and rooftop in their territory. The Zephyrian outpost fell within hours. Across the country, similar scenes played out. Retired Marine veteran Sam Collins had been living quietly in a small Montana town, trying to forget the wars he had fought in distant countries. When news of the invasion reached him, he drove to the local high school and stood in the parking lot with a bullhorn. Anyone who wants to learn how to kill aliens, meet me here in 1 hour, he announced. Bring whatever weapons you have and be ready to learn fast. 300 people showed up. Farmers, teachers, shop owners, teenagers, grandparents, anyone who could hold a weapon and follow orders. Collins looked at the crowd and saw something that filled him with fierce pride. Americans who would not bow to anyone. Listen up, he told them. These aliens think they can walk into our home and take what belongs to us. They think we're soft because we've been at peace for a while. They're about to learn the difference between being peaceful and being harmless. The training was intense but effective. Collins taught them how to move through buildings without being detected, how to set ambush using ordinary household items, and most importantly, how to think like predators instead of prey. Within days, his militia was coordinating with military units and conducting operations that impressed professional soldiers, but the most remarkable transformation happened in the most unexpected places. Dr. Patricia Murphy had spent her career studying alien cultures through the signals Earth had received over the years. She was a peaceful scientist who believed in communication and understanding between species. When the Zephyrians invaded, she locked herself in her laboratory and began studying the wreckage of their technology with a focus that bordered on obsession. They want to study us like lab rats, she muttered as she dissected a captured Zephyrian weapon. Fine, let's see how they like being on the other side of the microscope. Working with almost no sleep, she reverse-engineered their energy weapons and discovered weaknesses in their armor. Her findings were immediately shared with every human military unit on the planet. Within 48 hours, human forces were using modified versions of alien weapons against their creators. Computer programmer Steve Turner had been working on video game artificial intelligence before the invasion. Now he found himself breaking Zephyrian encryption codes and infiltrating their communication networks. He had never considered himself a warrior, but when he realized he could save human lives by disrupting alien coordination, he attacked their systems with the same intensity he had once reserved for debugging software. These aliens have pretty good security, he told his wife over dinner, as if discussing the weather. But they made one mistake. They assumed we wouldn't be able to understand their technology well enough to fight back. They forgot that humans are really good at breaking things that aren't supposed to be broken. The moment that truly demonstrated humanity's unity came when the Zephyrians targeted a school bus full of children evacuating from downtown Seattle. The bus was surrounded with nowhere to run and no military support nearby. The driver, an elderly man named Bill Stevens, who had been transporting kids safely for 20 years, made a decision that became legendary. He grabbed the radio and broadcast on the emergency frequency. "This is Bill Stevens on Route 47. Got 30 kids on board and aliens trying to hurt them. If anyone out there is human and can hear this, we could use some help." The response came from everywhere at once. Police cars that had been fighting aliens across the city converged on his location. Firefighters abandoned their posts to race toward the school bus. Construction workers drove their heavy equipment through traffic at dangerous speeds. Even civilians in ordinary cars joined the convoy, ramming through Zephyrian roadblocks to reach the children. When the aliens saw 200 humans charging toward them with no regard for their own safety, something fundamental shifted in their understanding of their enemy. These beings were not fighting for territory or resources. They were not following orders from commanders. They were fighting for something the Zephyrians could not comprehend. They were fighting for each other. The bus reached safety, but the message was clear to anyone watching. Humanity had awakened something that had been sleeping in their genes for thousands of years. They had remembered what it meant to be pack animals on a world where everything was dangerous and only the strong survived by working together. The Zephyrians had wanted to conquer a primitive species. Instead, they had united a planet of apex predators who had just realized they had a common enemy. The galaxy watched in growing horror as Earth transformed from a peaceful world into something that defied all known patterns of civilized behavior. Admiral Koroth, monitoring the reports from his flagship, began to understand that he had made a terrible mistake, but it was already too late to stop what he had started. 3 weeks into the invasion, the Zephyrians made a disturbing discovery. Humans were not just fighting back, they were learning. Every day the aliens faced new tactics, new weapons, and new strategies that seemed to come from nowhere. What had started as a simple conquest was becoming a nightmare that grew worse with each passing hour. Colonel Ryan Parker stood in what used to be a Starbucks in downtown Denver, now converted into a makeshift command center. Maps covered every surface, showing Zephyrian positions marked in red and human resistance cells marked in blue. The blue dots outnumbered the red ones by 10 to 1, and more appeared every hour. "Sir, we have confirmation that the aliens are pulling back from the industrial district," reported Sergeant Linda Cooper, a former accountant who had learned military communications in 3 days. "They abandoned over $50 million worth of equipment when they retreated." Parker nodded grimly. He had been a career soldier before the invasion, but nothing in his training had prepared him for this kind of war. The humans were not just defending themselves anymore. They were hunting the aliens with a systematic efficiency that would have impressed any military strategist. "What spooked them this time?" he asked. "Maintenance worker Tony Williams and his crew," Cooper replied. "They figured out that Zephyrian armor can't handle rapid temperature changes, so they've been hitting them with blowtorches followed immediately by liquid nitrogen from the air conditioning systems. The aliens are abandoning their positions rather than face that kind of attack." The strategy had been Tony's idea. He had been repairing the building's heating system when Zephyrian troops tried to use it as a base. Instead of running, he had studied their equipment with the same methodical approach he used to fix broken machinery. When he noticed that their armor became brittle in extreme cold, he started experimenting. "These alien boys think they're tough," Tony had explained to his crew while demonstrating the technique on a captured enemy soldier. "But their gear wasn't designed for Earth weather. We got hot summers and cold winters here. Let's see how they handle both at the same time." The results were devastating. Zephyrian armor that could stop high-energy weapons cracked like glass when subjected to thermal shock. What had taken the aliens decades to develop, humans had countered in a matter of days. Using nothing but basic physics and industrial equipment. Dr. Patricia Murphy had moved her operation from her university laboratory to an abandoned factory outside Chicago. Working alongside mechanical engineer Doug Harris and electrical contractor Mike Torres, she had created something that defied galactic understanding. Humans were building starships. "Hand me that power coupling," she called to Harris, who was installing salvaged Zephyrian engines into a hull made from terrestrial materials. "If my calculations are correct, this should give us enough thrust to reach their command ship." The vessel was a nightmare hybrid of human ingenuity and alien technology. They had taken the weapons from downed Zephyrian fighters, the engines from their transports, and the life support systems from their shuttles. Then they had built a framework using steel beams, titanium plating, and whatever else they could find in the industrial district. "Doc, this thing looks like it was built in someone's garage," Torres observed as he wired the control systems. "It was," Murphy replied with a grim smile. "But it'll fly, and more importantly, it'll fight." The Zephyrians designed their technology to be modular and easy to repair. They never considered that someone might steal their parts and build entirely new ships with them. The test flight was scheduled for the following morning. If it worked, humanity would go from having no space-based military to launching attacks against the alien fleet in orbit. The Zephyrians had brought advanced technology to Earth, expecting to use it against primitives. Instead, they had given humans the tools they needed to strike back. Meanwhile, in a suburb outside Atlanta, housewife Janet Lewis was making her own contribution to the war effort. She had been a chemistry teacher before marriage and children. But when the aliens invaded, she remembered everything she had learned about molecular science. Working in her kitchen, she had developed something that would change the course of the war, a compound that ate through Zephyrian metal. "The trick is getting the acid concentration just right," she explained to her neighbor Carol Wright, who was helping her mass-produce the mixture. "Too weak and it just stings them. Too strong and it eats through our own equipment. But get it perfect and their weapons dissolve like sugar in rain." They had tested it on a captured Zephyrian rifle, watching in satisfaction as the alien weapon simply fell apart in minutes. Now they were producing gallons of the compound in improvised laboratories across the country, shipping it to human forces, who used it to neutralize alien equipment without firing a shot. The moment that truly shocked the galaxy came when farmer Bill Stevens encountered a Zephyrian patrol near his cornfield. Instead of running or hiding, he climbed onto his combine harvester and drove straight toward them. The massive agricultural machine, designed to harvest grain, proved equally effective at harvesting alien soldiers. "You boys picked the wrong farm to mess with," Stevens shouted over the noise of his machinery as he chased the surviving aliens across his fields. "This land has been in my family for 4 generations, and I'll be damned if I let some space lizards think they can take it from me." The Zephyrians had never encountered anything like this in their conquest of other worlds. Civilized species either surrendered when outgunned or fought according to established military doctrine. They did not turn farming equipment into weapons of war. They did not create new technology in kitchen laboratories. They certainly did not build starships in abandoned factories using stolen parts, but the most terrifying moment for the aliens came when mechanic Tony Williams captured a wounded Zephyrian officer named Sub-Commander Thekvar. Instead of killing him or demanding information, Tony did something that chilled the alien to his core. He provided medical treatment. "Easy there, partner," Tony said gently as he bandaged the alien's wounds. "I know we're on different sides of this fight, but you're hurt, and I'm not the kind of person who lets anything suffer if I can help it." Thekvar had expected torture, interrogation, or death. He had not expected kindness from an enemy. As Tony worked to stop the bleeding, he talked in the casual way humans used when they were comfortable. "You know, this whole invasion thing was a real bad idea," Tony continued, his voice conversational. See, you aliens seem to think we're just another primitive species you can push around. But here's the thing you don't understand about humans. We're pack animals from a world that tried to kill us every single day for millions of years. He paused to check the bandage, making sure it was secure. We learned to work together because that was the only way to survive. We learned to use tools because everything else was bigger and stronger than us. And we learned to be very, very good at killing things that threatened our families. Ekvar listened in growing horror as this gentle human who was saving his life explained in precise detail how many different ways humans knew to destroy Zephyrian technology, disable their ships, and eliminate their soldiers. Tony's voice never changed from its friendly, helpful tone, as if he were explaining how to repair a broken engine rather than describing military tactics. "Now, I'm going to patch you up and send you back to your people," Tony concluded as he finished the medical treatment. "And you're going to tell them exactly what I just told you. This invasion stops now, or we show you what humans are really capable of when someone threatens our home." The wounded alien was released unharmed, carrying with him a message that spread through the Zephyrian fleet like a virus. These humans were not just fierce fighters. They were something far more dangerous. They were a species that could show mercy to enemies while simultaneously being utterly ruthless in defense of their own. The galaxy watched in stunned silence as humanity revealed the most terrifying trait any species could possess, the ability to be both predator and protector, depending on who needed their attention. 6 months after the invasion began, Admiral Koroth sat in a cell beneath the Pentagon, staring at walls made of concrete and steel. His mighty fleet was scattered across the galaxy, those ships that had managed to escape carrying tales of horror that no one believed. The Zephyrian Empire was begging for mercy from a species they had dismissed as primitive. Just half a year earlier, the cell door opened and a human entered. Koroth recognized him as Frank Roberts, the former mayor of a small town in Kansas who had somehow become Earth's first ambassador to the Galaxy Council. Roberts carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who had spent the war organizing refugee shelters and coordinating humanitarian aid. To Koroth, he was more frightening than any human warrior. "Admiral," Roberts said politely, taking a seat across from the alien prisoner. "How are they treating you?" The question confused Koroth. By all rights, he should have been executed weeks ago. Instead, the humans had provided him with medical care, adequate food, and even books to read. It was the kind of treatment civilized species gave to prisoners of war, not the behavior he expected from the savage death wielders his people had tried to conquer. "Why have you not killed me?" Koroth asked, genuinely puzzled. "Your species has shown no mercy to my soldiers in battle." Robert smiled, and there was something in that expression that made the alien shiver. "We showed plenty of mercy to your soldiers, Admiral. Every one of them who surrendered was taken prisoner and treated according to our laws. We only killed the ones who kept trying to kill us. That's not savage behavior, that's just practical." The truth was worse than Koroth wanted to admit. The humans had developed rules of engagement that were more civilized than anything the Zephyrian military used. They provided medical aid to wounded enemies, they protected prisoners from harm, and they had even established safe zones where alien civilians could wait for evacuation. But they had also demonstrated a capacity for violence that defied Galactic understanding when those rules were violated. "Your people want to discuss terms," Roberts continued, placing a data pad on the table between them. "The Galaxy Council has requested an emergency session to address what they're calling the Earth situation. Apparently, 47 different species are terrified of what humans might do next." Koroth read the document with growing dread. The Zephyrian Empire was offering to pay massive reparations, surrender all territorial claims in human space, and provide technology transfers as compensation for the invasion. In return, they wanted only one thing, a guarantee that humans would not retaliate against the Zephyrian worlds. "Your leaders are wise to be afraid," Robert said matter-of-factly. "We've learned some interesting things about galactic civilization over the past few months. Did you know that in 3,000 years of recorded history, no species has ever attempted to completely exterminate another? Wars are fought for territory or resources, but genocide is apparently considered unthinkable by civilized beings. The alien nodded slowly. It was true. Even the most aggressive species in the galaxy followed certain unwritten rules about warfare. Complete destruction of an enemy population was simply not done. The problem is, Roberts continued, humans don't think like other species. When someone attacks our children, our response is not limited by galactic customs or civilized behavior. Our response is limited only by our capability to inflict damage. And thanks to your invasion, we now have a very good understanding of just how capable we can be. 3 days later, the Galaxy Council convened an emergency session for the second time in 6 months. The Great Hall looked the same, but the atmosphere was completely different. Where once there had been casual conversation and diplomatic pleasantries, now there was nervous silence and fearful glances toward the section reserved for the newest member species, Ambassador. Frank Roberts entered the hall accompanied by 2 other humans, Dr. Patricia Murphy, now serving as Earth's military advisor, and General Carl Thompson, representing Planetary Defense Forces. They moved with the calm confidence of predators who knew they were the most dangerous beings in the room. High Counselor Vexthara called the session to order with visibly trembling tentacles. The Galaxy Council recognizes Ambassador Roberts. Of the human species, the floor is yours, Ambassador. Roberts stood slowly, his eyes sweeping across the assembled representatives. When he spoke, his voice carried the same quiet authority he had used as a small-town mayor dealing with budget disputes and zoning violations. But now that authority was backed by the knowledge that his species had defeated a military force that had conquered 3 star systems. Honored representatives, he began. 6 months ago, the Zephyrian Empire chose to invade Earth. They expected to find a primitive species that would surrender quickly or die quietly. Instead, they found humans. The war is over. We won. Now we need to discuss what happens next. The silence in the hall was absolute. Several species had stopped breathing entirely, while others made nervous sounds that their translators couldn't interpret. The Zephyrian leadership has offered reparations and territorial concessions, Roberts continued. These offers are adequate compensation for the material damage they caused. However, they do not address the larger issue that this invasion has revealed. He activated a holographic display that showed a map of the galaxy with small red dots scattered throughout. We have identified 847 worlds with populations under 1 billion beings. Most of these worlds have minimal defensive capabilities. In galactic terms, they are considered too small to be worth protecting and too weak to protect themselves. Murmurs began to ripple through the assembly as representatives realized where this was heading. The Zephyrians chose Earth because they thought we were defenseless, Roberts said, his voice growing colder. If they could make that mistake about us, they could make the same mistake about any of these smaller worlds. Other aggressive species could make similar calculations. The galaxy's current system of protection relies on the assumption that civilized beings will behave in civilized ways. He paused, letting the implications sink in before delivering the statement that would reshape galactic politics forever. Humans have learned that this assumption is wrong. Therefore, Earth is formally offering military protection to any world that requests it. We will establish patrol routes throughout the galaxy and maintain rapid response fleets capable of defending vulnerable populations from anyone who mistakes peaceful behavior for weakness. The reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Representatives began talking all at once, their voices creating a cacophony of surprise, fear, and relief. Some species were terrified at the prospect of human warships patrolling their space. Others were grateful that someone was finally willing to protect the weak from the strong. President Rebecca Stone's voice came through the communication system, broadcast live to every world in the galaxy. Let me be clear about humanity's position. We have no interest in conquest or territorial expansion. We have no desire to rule other species or impose our values on your worlds. But we have learned that there are predators in this galaxy who prey on the helpless, and we will not allow that to continue." Her words carried the same calm fury that had marked her first address during the invasion. Any species that chooses to attack defenseless worlds will find themselves facing the same response the Zephyrians received. We are not interested in fair fights or civilized warfare. We are interested in making sure that bullies learn very quickly that their behavior has consequences. Within a year, 300 worlds had formally requested human protection. Patrol ships bearing Earth's flag began appearing in distant star systems, their crews drawn from the same people who had defended their home world with improvised weapons and desperate courage. Construction worker Danny Rodriguez became captain. Rodriguez of the Earth Defense Fleet, Nurse Amanda Foster established the first interstellar medical corps. Teacher Mary Johnson created schools on distant worlds where alien children learned that there were beings in the galaxy who would protect them. The galaxy had expected humanity to take its place as another member species, following established customs and traditions. Instead, humans had become something unprecedented, a military power that used their strength to protect others rather than to conquer them. Admiral Koroth was eventually released and returned to Zephyrian space, carrying with him a message that spread throughout the galaxy. The humans were not like other species. They were pack animals who had extended their protective instincts to include anyone who needed help. They were predators who had chosen to hunt other predators rather than prey on the weak. The warning that appeared in galactic databases became legendary. Humans, approach with respect. Threaten at your own extinction. They are the species that could have conquered the galaxy but chose instead to guard it. The galaxy learned to sleep better knowing that somewhere in the darkness between stars, human patrol ships were watching for threats. They also learned to fear the species they had once dismissed, not because humans were cruel, but because they had proven that the most dangerous beings in the universe were those who fought not for conquest, but for protection of others.